All right, guys, if you can't tell by your inboxes, it is obviously launch day for the RTX 3050, a graphics card that when was announced, initially I was kind of excited because it means more affordable options. But if you took a look at the way things were going with AMD's 6500 XT, then obviously we were approaching this one with a little bit of optimism and skepticism at the same time. But we have all the data here, let's talk about it. NZXT's build is a quick and easy way to get a new gaming computer, and right now they're proud to announce expansion and availability to Australia, the Netherlands, France, and Italy. Build a gaming PC on your budget using the built-in configurator and see exactly how your favorite games will perform. Want to build your own PC but still have the NZXT Peace of Mind warranty? Then the new BLD Build It Yourself kit has what you want. Buy it and build it yourself, and NZXT has you covered. To get started configuring or building your next gaming PC, visit the build link in the description below. So this isn't gonna be one of those silly videos where I'm just kind of walking around acting like an idiot like I do every single day. I'm just gonna try and get this video done and get it out the door so that we can move on. Oh, also too, if you guys haven't really noticed by now, you haven't heard much about the 3090 Ti, that's because, well, my anonymous sources have it that it is being postponed until either February, maybe even March. So we're not gonna be seeing 3090 Ti in January, which is fine. We shouldn't be seeing it, period. Moving on, the 3050. It's an interesting card in that it's the first time NVIDIA has put RTX on a 50 series graphics card. Now this is only the second generation of RT, or ray tracing. And we had it on the 2060 and up on the Turing edition of graphics cards, or the 20 series cards. And now on Ampere, we have seen it take a year and a half since they launched it, but now they have RTX on a 50 series card, which makes it interesting when it comes to comparing it because of the fact, if you recall with 20 series cards, they had their RTX lineup and a GTX lineup. And it looks like this time around, they have completely kind of done away with the GTX naming, and they've just created an entire stack of nothing but RT cards. And the entry level card being this right here, the RTX 3050. Now the 20 series cards, they started, like I said, at 2060 and up, and then we had the 1650, 1650 Super, 1660, 1660 Super, and the 1660 Ti. Those 5 cards before that's 5, right? 50, Super, 60, Super, and Ti. Yeah, those 5 cards before we ever even got to the RTX cards. So when it comes to comparing this one, it's kind of interesting. We'll talk about specs, we'll talk about the comparing methodology, and then whether or not you guys should even buy it after you take a look at our benchmarks. So spec-wise, they're comparing it to a 1650. And this is where I'm gonna start to kind of get a little bit cynical in this video because of the fact that that's a fast one. Because comparing a 1650 to a 3050 is not a fair comparison at all. It's gonna make things look a lot better on paper than they actually are, because like I said, there are 4 cards between the 1650 and the 2060 on 20 series. So now NVIDIA this time around wants to say, oh yeah, well this is a 50 series card, so we're gonna compare it to the 1650 series cards. And no, you can't do that, because realistically, in terms of the tier hierarchy, it would really be more like a 1660 Super / Ti, where it would line up at being just under the 60 series card. So because we have less cards in the product stack this time, it's almost like they're stacking the deck and making it looking better than it actually is, by trying to have you believe you should be comparing it to a 1650. But spec-wise, since they're doing that anyway, graphics processing clusters, 2 for both, 2,560 CUDA cores on the 3050 versus 896 on the 1650. So obviously it's a much higher card. Ray tracing aside, DLSS aside, just raw performance compared to a 1650. It's gonna be much better at 1080p gaming, much higher FPS, probably better texture resolution, across the board, higher resolution on your gaming, or not higher resolution, but higher settings on your gaming, which means you're gonna get a better gaming experience than a 1650. As it should, it's the latest generation of graphics card and the latest generation of core design. Memory though, it's got twice as much. It's got 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 versus 4 gigabytes of GDDR5 found on the 1650. Now core clock, the black edition that we have right here from EVGA, the black, which is kind of like their entry level card, they only kind of go up from there, has a boost clock of 1777 versus a boost clock of 1665 found on the 1650. Clock for clock, generation to generation is not necessarily directly comparable. These are just specs that they're throwing out there to try and give you an A and B comparison. It's gonna look way better on paper than it really should be, because of the fact that, like I said, they're much farther spread tier of card then they're making it look here. And this is where I get a little upset with NVIDIA and their marketing, and that they're really like selling you snake oil. I find it to be a really dirty practice. Anyway, moving on, 8 gigabytes is obviously better than the 4 gigabytes found in the 1650, and there's a lot of arguments whether or not 4 or 8 is better, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, 8 gigabytes, definitely gonna be better than 4 when it comes to texture resolutions and high-res texture packs and such. 8 gigs should be the minimum this time around. Now, when we talk about our testing methodology here, I already explained to you the product stack differences. You cannot compare a 1650 to a 3050 simply because of the price alone. The 1650 had an debut MSRP price, which was available at the time because we didn't have nearly as much crap going on then as we do today, of $160. They would have you believe that we, as third-party independent reviewers, should compare generation to generation a $160 graphics card versus a $250 graphics card. And to that, I say that is completely bullshit. That is not the way we do this. We compare price point to price point. You can call it whatever you want, and you can manipulate the potential buyer and consumer by having you believe, naming and number-wise, the way something compares to each other. But at the end of the day, the only comparison that should make things an equal playing ground is price. The second half about that price discussion that sucks is obviously the only people that are going to get this for $249 MSRP are going to be the very first people that are able to buy it. And then obviously from there, there's going to be marking up and scalping. And that's if the retailers themselves don't take advantage of marking it up and scalping. So with that, I decided to run a couple of tests and see where it was initially comparing and landing closest to score-wise. And that actually ended up being a 1660. Not a Super, not a TI, not a 50, not a 50 Super, but a 1660. The MSRP of both are within a couple of dollars of each other, and performance was there as well. So we compared it to a 1660, and here's how it looks. So when you compare the 3050 to the more closely price-matched 1660, you can see it's still a benefit. It's just one of those things where I'm disappointed in NVIDIA trying to say that this card, 50 series RTX card, first of its kind, should be compared to a 50 series GTX rollover stopgap card during the first generation RTX cards being out with 4 cards in between it in terms of actual, tier lineup is disingenuous, and the reality is the gap looks much bigger by doing that, which makes the 3050 seem like that much better of a card. I feel like that's unnecessary to pull that kind of marketing trickery when it's already outperforming it as it should. It's a later gen architecture, it's got more CUDA cores, it's got plenty of memory. I mean, everything about this card is actually decent. It's what a lot of us had hoped the AMD card was going to be and ended up not being. That's because the AMD 6500 XT was just basically a rebranded laptop type GPU just stuck onto a card essentially that was never really intended. And I think it was one of those like, well, let's just release garbage, people will buy it anyway. Well, I guess they were right because everyone did buy it and they were being scalped. This card is actually decent. You get the effects that you would expect. If you're running 1080p and you don't run super high-end settings and you turn on ray tracing, it's playable. You can. It's not exactly the smoothest experience. I still personally would not recommend an entry-level ray tracing card for the purposes of ray tracing. It is a nice to have feature and eye candy if one, a game can implement it efficiently enough without it completely tanking your performance. And two, you just maybe are wanting screenshots or whatever of a pretty ray tracing screenshot. So you can turn it on, take an amazing screenshot, whether it be an open world, where you have nice ambient occlusion and you've got ray traced lighting and shadows and reflections. Then it will look amazing. Turn it off after your screenshot, go back to playing with normal rasterization. The other thing is you do get DLSS with this, which DLSS and DLDSS has just shown that is an amazing future we have to look forward to, just continuing to get better and better when it comes to upscaling or dynamic upscaling, as well as having just playable frame rates with difficult games without having to spend a fortune, theoretically, if you can get an MSRP, on a graphics card. I mean, first generation DLSS was an absolute disaster. 2.0 and DLDSS is just showing that the maturity and the deep learning is working, and it's a very, very nice to have feature. It's still one of the ultimate reasons why anyone would consider an NVIDIA card as far as I'm concerned. The ray tracing, fine. I mean, I don't even have ray tracing turned on in the games that I play, and I have a 3090. That's because depending on the title that you're playing, most of the time you don't even notice it if you're passing by things super quickly. If you stop and really pixel peep, then yes, you can absolutely see the ray tracing and the way it looks and how amazing it is. But if you're one of those people that's highly focused on the game and the story, and you're not stopping to literally look at reflections, then you're not gonna really notice it and the performance hit just isn't there. Like, for instance, Phil loves the game Control. He plays through it over and over and over because he just loves the way it looks. And he plays it with ray tracing on with the performance hit because it's the entire reason why he plays the game. To this day, we still believe Control is nothing more than a playable benchmark. But I digress. If ray tracing is what you're after, it shouldn't be a 3050. The problem is you can't necessarily easily go out and buy anything higher tier to give you better ray tracing performance. You can get decent ray tracing performance on AMD cards, but they're the same situation. Available in a lot of stores that I've looked at, but at a pretty exorbitant markup. The 3050 provides what it is that we were hoping. A card that is bringing 1080p, and you'll notice we only tested 1080p in these titles because of the fact that at its price point and its entry point, once you turn it up to 1440, you start dropping below that 60 FPS in many of the modern titles, which means that you just, at that point, are starting to reduce your settings, and then you're not gonna turn ray tracing on anyway if you have to reduce settings because you're gonna take a performance hit that's gonna be such a stuttery mess below 60. It nullifies the feature being there if you can't even use it. The feature being there and it being something that you're paying for, that's gonna be up to you to determine whether or not it's there. I can't say that NVIDIA should have necessarily launched a GTX series Ampere type architecture with ray tracing stripped out. I don't even know if you could have DLSS and ray tracing not on the same card. I'm not sure if that's possible. I would have, if it's like, they could have not put the RT cores in there in some way and ran the tensor cores for DLSS and just done away with ray tracing and dropped the price 50 bucks, 30 bucks, 50 bucks. That's in a perfect world. If you could just like toggle dip switches to say what features you want, that would make sense. But I don't know how the architecture works at a deep dive, so I can't tell you if that's even possible. But it's a lot better than AMD's card, obviously. It's 50 bucks more MSRP than the 6500 XT, but it's highly capable and definitely able to game. And the experience on the 3050 is only gonna go up from here because the Black Edition card from EVGA, which is the card I believe everyone was sent, is the starting point. From here, custom boost clocks that go even higher, custom cooling, overclocked cards, they all are gonna obviously increase your experience when it comes to gaming. I recommend this card at 1080p if you can get it for close to MSRP. Once it starts getting marked up $400 or $500, which is what we're seeing the 1600 series cards still go for, then obviously at that point, the performance per dollar is extremely skewed and upside down, and it just continues the nasty inflation and scalping and just complete messed up economy that we have right now regarding electronics, which then at that point makes it even more difficult to recommend, but it's gonna be in the same scale versus cards around it. Everything's gonna just slide up in price as an entire tide. It's all gonna go up together. If I sound a little jaded or cynical, it's because, yes, we're fatigued about this just as much as you guys. But it's here, it exists. How many are available? I have no idea. Only one brand was even seeding for availability, and EVGA sent these to NVIDIA, and then NVIDIA dispersed them. So good luck trying to find them. Thanks for watching, guys. I know you guys are sick of these type of reviews, but feel like we still owe it to you to bring you the information that we find when we take a look at these cards, because a lot of you trust us for this type of information. Watch other people's reviews, try and get a big collective opinion of whether or not it's even worth trying to get this card. Don't just listen to one reviewer, listen to as many as you can and formulate your own opinion. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.